Hello friends, this is Tom from the Tom Photo channel. Good to see you here. Let's talk about buying used cameras today. For quite some time I thought that cameras should be bought new because they are precision instruments. Sure that a new camera comes with warranty and a peace of mind. However, there are at least two good reasons to buy the camera used. First, used is cheaper. Second, most cameras that exist around us are no longer in production, and used is the only option. But let's get to the tips I've put together for you after having the experience of buying a fairly long list of used cameras over time. Tip number 1. Don't buy from professional photographers. Look around on the internet and it doesn't take long before you read a post from a professional photographer saying that they don't baby their gear. For them, the camera is a tool they use for work. It lets them earn money. They don't care about the few dents or scratches in places where it doesn't affect photo quality. However, you as a buyer probably want that your future camera was babied and treated like a jewel. You probably want the previous owner of your camera to be a paranoid person, a clean freak, someone who hates traveling and possibly also spending time in nature. And it's not only cosmetics that you sacrifice when you buy from professional photographers. Their cameras have seen it all. Rain, dust, changing the lens a lot of times, turning all buttons countless of times, cleaning the sensor and lens, and who knows how carefully. But most importantly, the cameras have taken a lot of pictures, and this wears out your camera. I'll come back to this point later. A pro can take an amateur's lifetime worth of photos in just a few weeks. Tip number 2. Buy from someone who misjudged their interest in photography. I've bought my best cameras from people who themselves bought before they thought. They saw beautiful pictures and wanted their own. They tried photography for a brief period of time and found that they couldn't do it or lost interest for some other reason. Maybe they got the camera before a trip and only used the camera on that single trip. I've seen this a lot. Or maybe the camera was a gift from someone. How do you confirm that this is the case? Of course you can trust the previous owner, but the shutter count or the number of images taken with the camera is a good measure. These cameras have usually taken less than 5,000 images. Tip number 3. Buy from the first owner. This can be tricky to confirm, but I think it makes a huge difference if the previous owner went to the store, paid a lot of money and unpacked the camera on the sofa with an elevated pulse, or alternatively the camera was picked up from the internet after thinking about it for a minute and paying 3 times less than a new one would cost. The first owner is just so much more careful with the camera because of the investment and the initial belief of holding on to the camera forever. The second buyer will treat the camera as a transitory object that is good for testing for weird stuff and can be sold for about the same price as the camera was purchased at any time. How do you tell if the previous owner was the first owner? The store receipts and original packaging won't count because these travel with owners. Ask what other cameras the buyer owns or has owned. They open up and tell you a story after which you can usually judge if they are into buying and selling used cameras or they are the other type. If you buy from the internet, check the history of the seller. If they have sold another camera very recently, you may have a reason to doubt that they are the first owner. If the owner says that the camera was purchased new a year ago but the camera went out of production 3 years ago, you also have a reason to at least doubt. Tip number 4. Buy medium-priced camera models. If you buy a very expensive camera that only interests pros, you can be reasonably certain that the seller is a pro and the camera has seen above average beating. Now see my first point above. If you buy a cheap point and shoot, the owner is less likely to know how to care for a camera. For example, that you shouldn't use your t-shirt to clean the lens. Also, cheap cameras receive less care and tenderness in general. Buy the medium range. Use price perhaps between 200 and 500 euro. This is where you can have a knowledgeable seller a camera-carrying hobbyist. Tip number 5. Avoid cameras with high shutter count. I know they say that DSLRs last for over 100,000 pictures and the hybrids go even longer because they don't have the mirror moving around. But it's not only the shutter mechanism that is being measured with this. In the extreme case, to take just one picture, you first change the battery, then pack your camera in a bag, walk in rain or cold, turn just about every button, maybe even drop your camera. And if you now press the shutter release, you increase the shutter count just by 1. And if your shutter count is 50K, then the chance that this happened is 50,000 times higher than camera with a shutter count of 1. See, the shutter count doesn't just measure the shutter count, it's a good proxy to show how many cycles the camera has gone through, that each could have included many things. Finding out the shutter count is easy. Take a picture and upload it to any of the many shutter count websites, such as camerashuttercount.com. This doesn't work for all camera models though. There are also software tools you can download that tell you camera shutter count, such as EXIF tool. This info resides in the metadata part of your photo file, so you need some method to access that part of the file. Tip number 6. Inquire if the camera was used for time-lapse or video. What increases the shutter count incredibly is time-lapse photography. One afternoon time-lapsing and you'll have a year's worth of images taken. However, a lot of cameras have both mechanical and electronic shutter. If the electronic shutter was used in time-lapse, it wore out the camera much less than the mechanical shutter would have. On the other hand, if the electronic shutter does not count toward the total shutter count, then buying a time-lapse camera is a bad idea because you have no way to find out what happened. In the ideal case, the mechanical and electronic shutter events are recorded separately. However, this is rarely the case. Ask the buyer a smart question to find out if he or she knows about time-lapse. For example, I really like this camera, I wonder if it would also work for time-lapse. Make a very straight and innocent face when you ask, appear less knowledgeable than you are. If the answer is, what's a time-lapse? You're good. But, oh sure, I can assure it works wonderfully for time-lapse. I could give you countless of beautiful examples, is the wrong answer. If the camera was used as a video camera, then it has worked much harder than the shutter count indicates, because often each video increases the shutter count just by 1. Tip number 7. Inspect the sample image. Ask the seller to give you a sample image or allow you to take a sample image. If possible, take the sample of a blue sky or white sheet. Looking at the sample image will tell you how much dust is on the sensor. One dust particle is not a problem, but if it contains a lot of dust, it was probably not cared for enough. Inspection of sample image will give away dead pixels, the pixels that are not recorded. Also look for chromatic aberration. If you see tiny red stripes in clear blue sky or on white paper, then it's possible that the sensor was fried in the sun. This happens with prolonged exposure against the sun. This could be why the camera is being sold. Tip number 8. Look for the signs of wear. Just like when buying a car, look at the wear of the rubber pads on the pedal if you question the number of reported miles or kilometers. The buttons and the strap are a good giveaway. A camera that has been on a lot of hikes or walks, show it in the strap. If the button markings are fading away, it shows an advanced age of the camera. Simple cleanliness is something to make a note of. Definitely look at the lens before you buy, both ends of it. A dirty lens is a bad thing, but a cleaned to death lens is much worse. Look at the lens against weak light at a 45-degree angle to see if you notice any micro scratches. Maybe you see a lot of them. Does the surface shine clearly or does it look like milk a bit? Does it still have protecting coating on? If you see a lot of colorful diffraction that has breaks in it, then the coating has been partially rubbed away in the process of over-cleaning. If the camera has a removable lens, remove it and take a look at the sensor. It has to be smooth and shiny like a mirror. You don't want to see tiny dirty dots or dust, let alone scratches. Tip number 9. Check the price online and buy it cheaper. Generally, 50% of the new price is a very good deal on a moderately used camera. There are many exceptions. Before you buy, check what other people have been paying for the same camera these days. Check used photo equipment sites. There are many out there. I always check eBay to get a feel of the market. Tip number 10. Buy several items together. It's often a good idea to buy much of the gear at once as opposed to each item separately. Body and lens together is usually cheaper than bought separately. You could also get small things in packages thrown in as extras. You could get spare batteries, remote controllers, lens hoods, camera bags, all kinds of adapters and filters just as extras for little additional cost if you buy someone's entire package all at once. If you buy those small things separately at a later time, you'll pay more. The small things that come with your camera that you don't need, you can always sell to help you cover some of the camera cost. I could go on, but this video has been long enough. I hope I could help you with your next camera purchase. Of course, if the seller of your future camera also watched this video, then I just made your life more difficult. Sorry about that. Thanks for watching. If you decide to subscribe to my channel, I'll be flattered. I'll see you again in my other videos. Have a beautiful day.